A report that the LA Kings have reached out to another coach to see if he's interested in the Kings job. I'll tell you why I don't believe it yet. And you have your say on another Kings fan feedback show on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. Also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night, a nightly podcast and YouTube show that wraps up the night in the NHL, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. It is time for another Kings fan feedback episode, your chance to sound off, ask questions about our favorite hockey team. So let's get right into it. And we start with Brian in Huntington Beach. And he says, I'm sure the guys like playing for Jim Hiller, but this team needs a new voice, a reset, a breath of fresh air. A friend of mine said there are rumors floating around social media saying the Kings have reached out and spoken to Pete DeBoer, but he's not ready to come back to coaching right now and is enjoying his time off. Have you heard anything? Thanks for another great week of shows. Brian in Huntington Beach. All right. For those of you that may not be on social media, and if you're watching on YouTube, I will show you the post. If not, I will tell you about it. But earlier on Friday, somebody named Cam Robinson, who apparently covers hockey, put out a post that said, quote, while not finalized, hearing that Pete DeBoer and the LA Kings have had advanced discussions. I'm told DeBoer is quite happy at the moment, so a deal would seemingly need to be substantial for him to sign on. I'll be honest with you, I have never in my life heard of Cam Robinson, and that's not a slam at him in any way. I scrolled through his social media posts for the last 2 months. He appears to be somebody who's very plugged into amateur hockey, college hockey, junior hockey, and talks a lot about prospects. I didn't see much evidence that he is any kind of NHL insider at all, but apparently he heard something and he decided to put it out there on social media for what it's worth. Now, there was a response from a couple of different, more plugged in sources to the NHL, including Pierre LeBrun, who is one of the more reliable, plugged in NHL insiders around. He said, quote, reached out to Ken Holland regarding today's speculation of a potential coaching change in LA. And the Kings GM says, quote, there's zero truth, end quote, to that. Also, Dennis Bernstein, who covers the LA Kings for the fourth period and does work for NHL Network Radio. He was on the radio, said he reached out to multiple sources and said there is no truth to that rumor at all. Okay, so, I've covered sports for a long time. Is it possible that is it possible that Ken Holland was asked for a quote on this post and is not being truthful? It's possible, but here's why I don't believe it. First of all, I said in a previous episode, the way the Kings are playing right now is cause for concern. The way they've played in the season doesn't, in my opinion, indicate that there is a coaching change that is imminent. I don't believe Ken Holland would reach out to Pete DeBoer just to test the waters if he wasn't seriously considering a coaching change. And in my opinion, I don't believe the Kings are seriously considering that yet. Now, that can change relatively quickly. I do believe if the Kings continue to not be able to score goals, if they continue to have the worst power play in the NHL, and they lose games, now they've only lost 2 in a row, but in other games where they've lost, they were able to get points, and those points are important. If they lose in regulation, like I said, 4 in a row, 5 in a row, then I think maybe that little hint of smoke that we smell suddenly turns into a fire that could burn very quickly. So as it stands right now, I do not believe the Kings have reached out to anyone and had any discussions. Do I believe that it's possible that Ken Holland has had discussions internally Sure. And I think that's part of a GM's job. I think they should go over every possible scenario and have a plan in place. If we decide to fire the coach, who's on our list? If Darcy Kemper, God forbid, goes down for the season, what do we do? What possibilities are out there to replace him or to make a trade? All those scenarios should be things that he and assistant GM Nelson Emerson, Mark Bergevin, they should all have those discussions about all kinds of different things. In addition to him, calling around and seeing, look, if the Kings feel like, look, Andrei Kuzmenko is not the answer, we need to find another winger to play in the top six, who's on the list? And then make some phone calls and just kind of put some feelers out there. Would this player potentially become available? If so, what possibly would you be looking at? So I think all those things happen with general managers, but I don't think they would call specifically a coach and ask him, hey, if we happen to fire our coach, would you be interested in the job? I don't think they do that unless they're really considering it. And I do not believe the Kings are really considering it right now, as far as going and taking the step of actually contacting someone. So that's where that is. And that's where I believe things stand at the moment. But it is a fluid situation and things could possibly change relatively quickly. We shall see. Chris in Oceanside says, once again, going to chime in that Hiller, needs to go. Just finished listening to Jim Fox call after the Capitals game when he said that the Kings are still looking for consistency here at home, and he's absolutely right. Way too many line combinations and defensive pairings. For lack of a better word, it is crappy hockey. I definitely is reminding me of the Kings when they couldn't score and they brought in Sutter. I don't think Sutter or DeBoer would be a fit. I would love to see Peter Laviolette come in and give it a try. A solid defensive coach, but knows how to get his team to score. I know you don't think we need a change yet, but I'm done with this guy. Happy holidays to you and yours. And that is Chris in Oceanside. As far as the changes and the shuffling of the lines and all that, I think Jim Hiller's kind of in a tough situation. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If he doesn't do anything, then people are going to be saying, what is he doing? We can't score. The power play's terrible, and he's just going to keep rolling the same thing out there. So I think there did need to be changes. There did need to be some shuffling, specifically the power play. But at the same time, once you've made a decision, you do have to stick with it for a while. For example, having Doughty run the first unit, having Brandt Clark run the second unit, I think the Kings need to give that a chance to work and see how it goes. So, these things, rarely do you make a change and it just suddenly clicks and everything works. So I understand the movement and the changing of the lines and moving guys up and down. I get that. And the way when you're not doing well, I think you need to do some of those things, but I think that maybe he does it a little bit quick and doesn't let it go a little bit, but I understand. I do understand that. Dylan in San Diego says, thanks for putting out a high-end product for me to listen to on my long commute. On to the Kings. I think that Turcotte should feel insulted to see 0 goals Deneau playing on the power play instead of him. Just one of many areas that I want to scream at Jim Hiller for his coaching decisions. Go Kings, go. And that was Dylan in San Diego. So I assume you're talking about the last game against the Blackhawks. If that was the case, that was Jim Hiller rewarding Philip Deneau for playing a good game. And he has been struggling. They're trying to get him going. And so they're rewarding him with some extra ice time in a game where he was playing well. I actually agree with the decision of doing that. That said, generally speaking, I would not want Philip Deneau on either of the power play units, generally speaking. But I understood the move in that game kind of based on the circumstances surrounding that. We have this from Joe Powell in Tampa, Florida. He says, I'm a decades-long Kings fan. I'm a fan of your video blog too. I've seen every game, and enough of this anemic and dysfunctional team being led by an inferior and third-rate lifeless coach. If Hiller was that good, he would have been a head coach years ago. He really doesn't know how to make a high-paid talent, or he doesn't know how to make the high-paid talent function on the ice. He won't even try to copy offensive tactics we see from other elite teams in the league. It is unfathomable that this team can't score, but it's obvious why. Kopi is aged, slow, meandering, and floating around, avoiding contact and grinding. He is objectively a third-line center at this late date. His lack of scoring ability now is very self-evident because he just doesn't have it anymore. He is coasting to retirement. As for Byfield, at 19 points and only 4 goals, this is a real big red flag that he truly doesn't have any superstar talent. That was all hype that he was this big marquee star center for the future. This charade is now exposed. So what if he gets 55 to 60 points? Trade him for some value and be done with this experiment. It might do him some good to see new pastures in the league. Desperately needs help. That is where the trade of Byfield might add the complementary players, throw in some others to make a deal attractive to a buying team. This team is awfully hard to watch. I've seen better juniors play hockey with more effort and enthusiasm. The chemistry is off this year. This usually is traceable to a dull, anemic, and an uninspired coach who has lost any semblance of control and respect. Why should anyone on this team respect Hiller? He doesn't match up with the other highly touted coaches in the league. The team is appearing ready to fold up shop like a cheap tent. Now is the time to make changes to salvage this year and build for the 2026-27 season. And that was Joe in Tampa. That's a lot, Joe. Part of having the fan feedback show each week is so that you guys can vent, and you certainly did that. I know, like, based on that email, you'd think the Kings were the worst team in the league. They're not. Are there better head coaches available than Jim Hiller? I believe there are. Is all of the Kings' issues completely on him? I would say no. I don't think he's the worst coach in the league. As for trades, I don't see the Kings trading Quentin Byfield. I understand that he's not the superstar or isn't likely to turn into the superstar that we all wished he would be, but I still think he can be a very good player. I would disagree about your comments about Anze Kopitar. He's not a third-line center. He is not a first-line center anymore, but he's still a very good, capable second-line center. And if the coasting into retirement comment was implying that he's not giving it his all every game, I would disagree with that. If the Kings are to fold up like a cheap tent, as you said, you will be getting the coaching change that you were looking for, if that in fact does happen. All right. Did Jim Hiller's comments after the last game show signs he's losing the team? That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. The World Cup is coming back to North America, Los Angeles, as a matter of fact, and it's going to be here for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it is going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Gametime app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats become available, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app, and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, and you have your tickets within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. The seat view feature is a game changer. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. Prices include fees up front, which I love. No last-second surprises at checkout. Alerts for teams and matches that make it easy to grab tickets the moment they drop instead of missing out. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets. Every match, concert, or event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Gametime. Our next email comes from Edward, originally from Fullerton, now in Chicago for college. He says, I have started to see a lot more criticism of Phillip Danault amongst Kings fans, and while his numbers may not be amazing recently, I want to offer a defense of Danault. In the 2025 playoffs, Danault had 2 goals and 6 assists for 8 points in 6 playoff games. 2024, it was an off year for him with only 1 assist, yet he was still an even player. In 2023, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in 6 games, talking about the playoffs. 2022, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points, and he was a +6. Danault is a proven playoff performer whose game improved significantly in the big moments. I would compare him to a Sam Bennett type of player, and while I doubt that Danault would make a Conn Smythe run, Sam Bennett has always been generally a bad regular season player or have bad regular season numbers before turning it on in the playoffs. The Kings need this Kings team needs to be focused for the playoffs, and Danault is an extremely useful player in those situations. In fact, I haven't even mentioned his defensive game, and face-off talents that are even more important in the spring. Long story short, I understand that people want more from Dano now, but we must not lose sight on the bigger picture. Once again, thank you much for the podcast and all the work you do. And that was from Edward in Chicago. I think those are all fair points. I do think that we do need to keep the bigger picture in mind. I said it after last season that this regular season was in some ways meaningless. The Kings could have the greatest regular season, and there would be a number of fans who would justly say, that's great, but show me what you can do in the playoffs. And that's fair. The Kings also could have a mediocre regular season, and if they go on a deep playoff run, then basically that will all be forgotten. See the 2012 LA Kings, who were the 8th seed and then went on to win the Stanley Cup. So yes, I do agree that the bigger picture is something we need to focus on. Of course, the Kings have to get in the playoffs for that to all be relevant. But I do think it's fair to point out that Phillip Danault is a guy who could be very valuable in the postseason, but it's also fair to point out he is not having a very good regular season as well. Andy in Guelph, Ontario says, great episode Thursday. I agree with many of your thoughts. My view, it's a tough stretch. It's they're not getting drastically outplayed or blown out. It's just not producing the points we want. What is a coaching change really going to do? Sure, you could fire Hiller and they could galvanize under a new bench boss. But as you said, they haven't stopped playing for Hiller. A coaching change does not change the fact that at best, they are a first or second round team. Easier said than done, but they need a new look up front. The D and the goaltending has been solid and has come together nicely. We need a difference maker or creativity and goals. Tage Thompson, ? Hell, maybe even blow the farm for Quinn Hughes. Clark, Greentree, first plus, and I'd make that deal. Unless we all just accept that it's time to take a step back and develop the next core with more patience. I do think we're a playoff team, and that's better than the basement every year. We need goals, and I hope we get some. And that was Andy in Guelph, Ontario. For Quinn Hughes, I would give up anything basically to get that guy. That's a generational defenseman in his prime. Unfortunately, he would also have to come with the caveat. He would have to re-sign here. Like, he's going to be a free agent, unrestricted free agent after next season. And if we could get him, and if he says he's not, going to re-sign here, then, obviously that wouldn't make sense. But I don't think there is much chance, unfortunately, of Quinn Hughes coming to LA. I do disagree, however. I think the Kings could be better under a better coach. Yes, they haven't. I don't think they've quit on Jim Hiller. But look, I said it in the offseason. I would have gotten another coach. That said, Jim Hiller is the coach of the Kings, and I'm not rooting for him to fail, because that's rooting for the team to fail, and I'm not that type of a fan. I would never. I know that there are people out there very passionate about getting another coach, and there are some fans who would be like, I hope we suck so we can fire him. I just can't do that. I'm not that kind of fan. You be the fan you want to be. That's just not who I am. So I'm rooting for him to do well, but I will, if things get to a point where I think that they need to make a coaching change, I'll absolutely say that. Sasan in Westwood says, just wanted to get your thoughts on Jim Hiller's comments during the post-game media scrum and who you think it was directed towards. Here's the quote, we had a team of players tonight that thought they were going to play the game their way, how they wanted to play, end quote. To me, that's one of the first times I can remember Hiller basically calling out the players for ignoring the coaching scheme and demanding accountability for his team. Granted, I know he can't name specifically and put guys on blast directly to the media, or else he risks losing the locker room. But to me, that was a clear message to the veterans on the team to get the guys, especially the younger ones, to buy in and stop trying to mimic the sexy style of hockey that just isn't what the team is built to do. I'm a season ticket holder, and you can tell at the stadium, fans are getting fed up with the lack of success. Multiple times this season, they booed the team off the ice, and honestly, I don't blame them. Investing the time and money to go to a game, sitting in traffic, buying parking, getting food and drinks is not cheap, and the Kings honestly haven't given us fans many reasons to cheer for them on home ice. I'm just frustrated. I want the team to win, but they just can't figure it out. And if the players themselves won't buy into the scheme, I have to get called out in the media, or have to get called out in the media by the coach. then why should us fans buy in and support this team? I realize I am rambling and venting at this point, so I'll end the email here. Thanks again for all your coverage of the team. Go Kings, go. Hope we can get some revenge against the Blackhawks this Saturday. And that was Hassan in Westwood. I think Jim Hiller was absolutely calling out his team, and he should. And it's not uncommon. NHL coaches do this often, and it's not out of the ordinary. I'm guessing he also told the team this during the intermissions in the locker room, and hopefully that's why they responded with at least a decent third period. I do think that, or I should say, I don't think that this is evidence that the team is tuning him out. So not yet anyway. As far as the fans booing or being frustrated, I get it. I'm a fan. And while I'm not much for booing, I've been very frustrated with the team as well. And I have no issue with fans expressing themselves and letting the team know that they're unhappy with what they're seeing. I will say this, if I was a Kings fan right now, I don't know that I would be buying tickets and spending money and all the things that you talked about to go to a game in person until they figure it out. I would still support the team. I'd watch on TV. I know that's not an option for season ticket holders like you, Sasan. I would say you got your money's worth last season being a season ticket holder, but you're not getting it so far this season. We have a listener or a viewer who thinks that I am a little overly critical. We will read his email next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. The holidays are amazing, but they can also get overwhelming fast. Travel, gifts, parties, year-end expenses. It's really easy to lose track of your money this time of year. That's why Monarch has become such a game changer for me. If you want to keep your finances under control this holiday season, you need to be using Monarch, rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025. Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, simple dashboard. The holiday spending category has become a lifesaver. You can see exactly what's left in your gift and travel budget in real time. Monarch makes money check-in simple. It's just a minute or two each week, and you're completely up to speed. And it's great for couples, shared dashboards, shared goals, and fewer wait, how did we spend that? Conversations. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with the code LOCKEDONNHL. Our next email comes from Spike in Fremont. He says, time to rant. This will be easy and quick to read. The coach. Interesting events today, I believe LeBrun and Bernstein, but if the lamp doesn't start lighting up more often soon, something will have to be done. DeBoer is the right choice. Yes, shelf life will be short, but like you said, who cares? Actually, maybe it's time to make a change before Anaheim puts more distance in front of them and gasp, San Jose overtakes them. San Jose, really? The effort, it's there most of the time, but they've got bad luck in front of the net. Danault couldn't buy a goal on Thursday, and they've hit more pipe than a plumber, whatever that means. They've rang the bell numerous times this season, and not in a good way. Kuzmenko, there's a reason why he's played for a multitude of clubs. He was wide open when driving the net against the Blackhawks on Thursday, but instead of shooting, he decided to pass to someone who was double-teamed. This isn't adult league. Shoot the bloody puck. At this rate, he'll be lucky to get a deal in Russia next season. Power play. Defense is getting in the shooting lanes. Maybe need to move the feet more to get open. Byfield, I've always wondered if the Kings should have taken Stützle instead of Q. This is the time he needs to show why the Kings took him high in the draft. Carry the team now. Instead, he and Danault are on milk cartons. Have you seen him? The ticking clock keeps getting louder. Dean Lombardi pulled the trigger on Terry Murray in 2011 and told the players it was their fault. They liked Murray, but were stuck in the mud. Fortunately, Daryl Sutter came in, knew the rest. I think that time for a change is getting close. We'll always proudly wear the Kings colors no matter what. Go Kings, go. And that was Spike in Fremont. I know exactly what you're talking about on that play with Kuzmenko. I screaming at my television to shoot the puck. I cannot believe he did not shoot the puck in that situation. And as a coach, that has to drive you absolutely crazy. This comes from Darren in Arizona. He says, Eddie. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge that I am a fan of your show and I appreciate the work you put in. However, I do believe that you may be a little overly critical at times. As a fan, I will agree that the last few games have been difficult to watch, but you mentioned we are on a bad stretch. We've only lost 2 games in a row and are 2 points away from being in the top of our division. You once had a caller a few months ago, and I believe his name was Brian, express his frustration with the negativity of our fan base and at times your show. I hate to tell you this, but I somewhat agree with many things he said. If our boys win, it's not good enough, or it was a bad win. If we lose a game or two, everyone wants to fire Hiller or the GM or cast blame on 1 or 2 players who may not have scored or are underperforming. We can be the number 1 team in the league and our fan base will still find something to complain about or find something negative instead of focusing on the positives and what we're doing right. One thing I always hear on this show is we need superstars. Look at Edmonton, the top 2 players in the world, and they have not won a cup. Oh, wait, they're near the bottom of the league standings this season, perhaps on a bad stretch. All I'm saying is that it takes more than having superstars to be contenders or win. Your thoughts? One more thing. Why do you continue to highlight Ed and Brea? He's either looking for attention or is truly a duck fan that has no sense of what he's talking about. It is definitely becoming annoying and does not represent our boys, the fan base, and your show very well. Thank you once more for all you do. And that was Darren in Arizona. All right. As for Ed and Brea, I have met him. I know he's a Kings fan, and he's a good guy. If you think I'm negative, by the way, and I appreciate anybody who gives their honest opinion. I don't take offense at anything that you said at all. But as for Ed and Brea, as I'm losing my train of thought here, anybody who takes the time to email the show, I'm going to read their email, unless it's something, unless it's just something full of offensive comments or whatever. He takes the time to write the show, and I will continue to read his thoughts. I did sports talk radio for a long, long time, and he reminds me of some of those polarizing callers that we would have, and people either loved them or they hated them, but they always talked about them, and they were always a topic of conversation. So, as for me being too negative, I appreciate your comments. I don't see it as being negative, as I just try to be honest. Like if I say the power play sucks, is that being negative or is that being honest? It's ranked last in the NHL. It's a fact. It's not really an opinion. And yes, you're right. We've only lost 2 games in a row, but the offense is as bad as it's been all season. The power play, like I said, is literally the worst in the NHL. So look, I'm not looking for reasons to be critical, but facts are facts. And look, I mean, as far as our fan base, I think our fan base is like every other fan base. There's always going to be a portion of the fan base that is unhappy with certain aspects, right? If the Kings were playing really, really well, there would be something that wasn't working right, and they would want that changed. Or we need, we're a good team, but we need to be better, and all that kind of stuff. So I get all that. I think, like I said, I think every fan base has that. I don't think it's just Kings fans. So, as for your question about the Kings needing a superstar, I believe that one of the reasons why I don't think this team is capable of realistically competing right now for a Stanley Cup is that we don't match up against those teams that have that elite talent. The Oilers have been to 2 Stanley Cup finals in a row with those 2 guys. And yeah, they're struggling this year so far, but they're a lot closer than we are. So I do think that's an area where the Kings are lacking. Ed and Brea closes it out. He says, Pete DeBoer likely does not want to take this Kings job because it cannot work with the current roster we have. No elite talent like he had with the Stars. Yes, part of the issue is Hiller. However, this core has shown that scoring has always been an issue, and they cannot finish as we have seen in our playoff losses. My wish is the Kings get a game changer like Tage Thompson, the second Tage Thompson reference in this show. He would change the Kings offense drastically because the Kings don't have any dynamic players. The last 10 games, the Kings have scored 3 goals 3 times. The other less than 3 goals. Cannot win games in today's NHL where you have to rely on defense and goaltending, where the Kings are top 10 in those categories, and I do give the coaching staff credit there. Keep up the good work. Go Kings, go. And that was Ed in Brea. And yes, I did edit out all of his Ducks talk because he includes a lot of that every week, and we don't need to hear that. Ed, I will say that the Kings clearly have offensive issues. That's obvious. But as with the previous emailer talking about, we just focus on the bad and not the good. I do think the Kings are very, very good defensively. They're very, very good in goaltending. And I think that's important to be a winning team. So the Kings do have some elements of being a team that can do something in the playoffs. They just need to have a decent offense. I don't think they need a dynamic offense to have some success in the playoffs, which is kind of what we're looking for at this point. As for Tage Thompson, he is a big, strong, talented guy. I think he's a very good player. I would love to see him join the Kings. That said, I don't think he is a game changer. I don't think him joining the Kings automatically makes them into some kind of a contender. He couldn't hurt. He could certainly help. Is he going to come here and just turn things around? I don't see that happening, but he could help. Sure, he could help. But then again, you have to wonder, how does a player like that, or how does a dynamic player, if you think he's a dynamic player, how does he fit into what the Kings do? As we heard with Jim Hiller's comments, right? It's about playing in their system and playing to their strengths and those types of things. All right. Thank you to everyone who took the time to email this week. This show is literally not possible without your participation. Our next show will be after the Kings Blackhawks second game of this week coming up on Saturday. We'll have a recap of it, and hopefully we'll get to say some positive things, because I love saying positive things despite some people's opinions. Believe me, I would love to talk about how the Kings absolutely dominated the Blackhawks and we're back on track or whatever. If you want to email this show at any point, at any time, whether it's for a feedback show or any other reason, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And you can always leave your comments in the comments section if you're watching on YouTube. We'd love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening. I almost said that like I'm Ron Burgundy. Thank you for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.